Okay, so here is my presentation on factors affecting performance. This is my third time doing this presentation because first time went all the way through it was great, and then I watched it again and you can't see anything that I was talking about, so I had to do it again. So third time's a charm, baby. So here we go. Factors affecting performance. It's a key point to understand that performance is different than normal exercise. This is competition. This is your all-out efforts. Olympic athletes, professional sports players, like this is it. This is competition. This is peak performance. So, a little bit of background summary that I think we need to go over. 4 things: energy source equals activity, lactate threshold, central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, and VO2 max. So, energy source and activity. This just has to do with what is your activity and what energy are you going to be using for that activity. Is it a short bout? Is it aerobic? Is it anaerobic? Are we using phosphocreatine, glycolysis, oxidative? What are we using? So that should be pretty familiar with what we've been going over in class and just from the start of the semester. Next is the lactate threshold. So lactate threshold, I attached the graph here. That's when your hydrogen, it just starts this, you're slowly climbing, and then it just peaks. That's where it shows up in your blood and your muscles, and you reach this point, you can only go so much further. So once again, should be pretty fresh on our brain. We talk about this a lot. Central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. This is just to understand that the central nervous system is your brain and your spinal cord. Peripheral nervous system is everything outside of that. And then your VO2 max, once again, we should understand this. It's where you get to that certain point where you've reached the max oxygen that you can intake. General principles, we got 3 of them. Fatigue, factor limiting all-out anaerobic, and factor limiting all-out aerobic. In the textbook, there is this chart that I think is super relevant for performance and the things that affect it. We won't be covering everything in here, but everything does apply to what we're talking about. I may just not mention it. You got your diet, central nervous system function, strength and skill, environment, energy production, anaerobic sources, aerobic sources. These all tie into performance, and these are all key points that if you're someone that's involved with someone that has to do performance, an athlete that has to have peak performance, these are all things that you should look at and make sure they're doing good at. Outside of like training, lifting, skills, stuff like that. But that kind of gets talked about right here. So, first, one of those general principles, fatigue. So, it's good to identify what fatigue is. Fatigue is the inability to maintain a power output or force repeatedly under muscle contractions. Also important to know that this is recoverable by rest. So I attached this brain right here because I think it's important to know that exercise starts in the brain and it ends in the brain. This is where it's going to begin, and when you fail, this is probably what was causing the failure. So, central fatigue, this is in your central nervous system, brain, spinal cord. Number 1, neurotransmitters. This is important to note. Neurotransmitters are really important in the brain. They make things happen, and they tie into the second bullet point, arousal. Neurotransmitters play into the arousal. The 3 neurotransmitters we're going to talk about briefly right here: dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin. I'm not going to touch too much about norepinephrine. We know that it increases your heart rate, helps with energy, making sure things get to the right places. But we're not going to talk too much about that other than it helps increase your heart rate, helps get you going, get you excited. But we are going to touch a lot about arousal and dopamine and serotonin. So with arousal is super important with performance. You want to have your brain going, you want to have your body ready to recruit muscles, ready to go give all-out performance, whether that be a super long endurance bout or a super short, super powerful 10 seconds, 1 minute, really quick. You need to have this level of arousal, and it comes from having a high level of dopamine and a low level of serotonin, having that ratio. When you have that ratio where dopamine's high and serotonin's low, you're going to have the arousal needed to recruit muscle fibers, get the job done. When you have the opposite, it's just the opposite. You're not going to have that arousal, that motivation that you need to recruit all of the muscle fibers that you need. And also, key point with arousal, one of the things that causes high levels of serotonin and low levels of dopamine is overtraining. So that's important to know. Protective mechanisms. I put a little break here on the brain because your brain has certain things in it that are going to come together to stop you from hurting your body. If it senses that your muscles are fatiguing, muscles are starting to fail, that your temperature is too high, homeostasis needs to come back to certain things, your heart is freaking out, it's going to enact brakes that will lower your performance essentially, but it's slowing down these things so that you can heal, so that it can protect itself. So your brain has protective mechanisms. And the 10 to 15 right here is to note that 10 to 15% of what we're going to be talking about comes from central fatigue. Like, of all the factors that affect performance, this is 10 to 15%. So if you're dealing with high school athletes, I don't know if I'd focus a ton on this, but if you're dealing with Olympic athletes, 10 to 15% is a big deal. So, peripheral fatigue. This is your peripheral nervous system, everything outside of the brain and the spinal cord. You got 5 things: neural factors, mechanical factors. There's going to be a lot in this slide. Bear with me. It makes sense. I'm going to try my best to explain it. So number 1, neural factors. So here we have the neuromuscular junction. In the book, it said that there are certain times under extreme exercise that your body is going to block your T-tubules at the neuromuscular junction. What that does is it prevents a action potential from going all the way down this and creating the calcium to come out of the sarcoplasmic reticulum, attaching to that actin and myosin, and allowing for cross-bridging. So this is important because if you can't cross-bridge, you can't contract, and you can't produce force. If you can't cross-bridge in your legs, then you can't run. You can't cross-bridge in your arms, and you can't lift. So that's super important to note. Next one, mechanical factors. Once again, has to do with cross-bridging. This is just closer on the actin and myosin. When you get high levels of hydrogen, that H+, it prevents calcium from binding onto this troponin, and the troponin can't pull off the tropomyosin, and the myosin head can't bind onto the actin. If you can't do that, you can't cross-bridge, you can't contract, you can't perform. Free radicals. For those that don't know what a free radical is, this is a molecule that has 1 electron on the outer ring. The free radical in this context, it goes around damaging certain things in the body, and with the myosin and actin, it damages the myosin head and the troponin binding site. Once again, if those things are damaged, you can't power stroke, you can't cross bridge, you can't contract. Big deal. Also, free radicals, they disrupt the sodium and potassium pumps, which is also important because you got to have that balance to help with action potentials. So, energetics, this just has to do with your ATP. When you're exercising, when you're doing these bouts of high performance, you need ATP. Sometimes the need is higher than what we have in our body. There becomes a buildup of inorganic phosphates, of hydrogen, things that cause these inabilities to contract. And then your fiber type recruitment, this just has to do with your type 1, your type 2A, and your type 2X. As the intensity gets higher and higher, you're going to recruit your type 2X. Type 2X leads to fast fatigable, and it also has higher levels of hydrogen. Hydrogen, boom, can't cross bridge. All right, so now we're getting away from the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, and now we're going to talk about specific types of performances. This one is anaerobic performance, so we're going to be dealing with PC, glycolytic or glycolysis. Both these charts come from the textbook. and I think they describe what we're talking about perfectly. First one is your 10-second bouts, less than 10 seconds. And we're just going to work through the charts because it describes it extremely well. So if you have a short-term performance, less than 10 seconds, the things that are going to be important are these ending things: your practice, motivation, arousal. We're going to start with practice. If you practice, you do it well, you do it intentional, you're going to increase your skill and technique, and you're going to perform well. Motivation, arousal. If we're not burnt out, if we have those high levels of dopamine and low levels of serotonin, then your norepinephrine are going to kick in. You're going to be able to recruit the correct fiber types and distributions in the right muscles. Your PC and glycolysis comes in, muscular power is high, boom, good performance. The opposite is just the opposite. Low motivation, low recruitment, low power, bad performance. 10 to 180 seconds, they broke it down into 10 seconds and 60 seconds, 60 seconds and 180 seconds. This is essentially the same thing. It talks a lot about your fast fibers, where the energy is coming from, and then since it's coming from those fast fibers and those energy, what are you going to see an increase in? You're going to see an increase in blood and muscle hydrogen content, which is going to lead to fatigue. This cross-bridging stuff we saw on the last slide. The 60 seconds, 180 seconds, it's the same thing. Essentially, it's just you're not going to see as much hydrogen in your muscles and blood because you're not at such a high intensity and you're using a little bit more of the slow fibers. So those are factors that you need to keep in mind when you're talking about anaerobic performances. Okay, now we're jumping over to aerobic performances. This is your oxidative stuff. These are your longer bouts, your longer performance, your longer exercises. So, once again, the textbook has 3 great charts, and it's better than putting up a ton of words, and I can just work our way through it. So this first one, we're talking about bouts from 3 to 20 minutes, and we're just going to start from the bottom and work our way up. So on this left side, it talks a lot about genetics and training and how that affects your stroke volume max and your heart rate max, which affects your maximum cardiac output, which creates a higher VO2 max. Higher VO2 max, better performance. On the right side, genetics, can't really control that. Mitochondrial and capillary density, you can control that through your training. You train correctly, you're going to increase mitochondria, you're going to increase your capillary density, which is going to be better for your fiber types, going to create the correct fiber types for this performance. And then this just has to do with a lot of oxygen, hemoglobin, stuff like that. It's just saying it'll increase your VO2 max. Next one, 21 minutes to 60 minutes. We're starting to get higher with that duration. Once again, it's just best to work our way through where we're seeing all this stuff, all these factors. Heat load, dehydration. Obviously, don't want to be dehydrated, don't want a high heat load, and then you'll be able to have a better percent of your VO2 max, and then your set VO2 max, steady state VO2, you're going to perform better. Lactate threshold, type 1 fibers. Percent of type 1 fibers, depending on the percent you have, you're going to have certain biomechanics, certain bioenergetics, and running economy. Once again, this has a lot to do with your training. Train correctly, train for the event that you're going to perform in, and depending on what type 1 fibers we use, you're going to have a certain lactate threshold. Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory if you just look through the material and see which factors we need to focus on that kind of lead to everything else. Last one, anaerobic performances of 1 to 4 hours. These are your marathons. These are your longer endurance things. Once again, we can kind of look at where things start. Percent of VO2 max is a big deal. Your heat load is going to play into that. Your dehydration is going to play into that. Liver and muscle glycogen stores, we need to make sure with these longer bouts, you want to have the correct supplement during your running or whatever you're doing for that hour to 4 hours. Like, you want to make sure you're eating correct carbs, sugars, fats, putting the right things in your body. diet, that's leading up to it. The more muscle glycogen stores you have, the better percent VO2 max you're going to be able to use, and better you're going to be able to perform. Percent of type 1 muscle fibers play into your lactate threshold, like this last one we saw, and then they also play into your biomechanics, bioenergetics, running economy. Yeah, I just read through those charts, but it's just the best way to put it, easiest way to put out the factors that are playing into these different intensities and durations. All right, so these next 3 slides are going to go over the current research that I was able to find. The first and the last are from 2025, and the middle one is from 2024. They're cool to look at because they play into all the things that I have been talking about for this past 15 minutes or whatever. First one, so this study, they were talking about dopamine. So we instantly, when we think about dopamine, we're thinking about central nervous system, those neurotransmitters. And it talked about how dopamine, if you block it, is that actually going to affect how fast we fatigue. So you block the dopamine, you have low arousal, low motivation, and guess what they found? Exercise time to fatigue, it was lower, it was decreased. So if you have less dopamine, you're going to have a faster fatigue time. And that ties into our central nervous system fatigue section. Next one. So this was an 8-week study. They used moderate continuous training and HIIT, so just those quick bouts and continuous bouts. And they wanted to see if this helped with their lactate recovery, lactate threshold, and ability to clean it out. And what they found was, yeah, it works. If you train specific activities and train specific buffers, they're going to get better. Your body's going to become more efficient. Your body doesn't want to choke. It doesn't want to die. So it's going to become better, and it doesn't want to experience that discomfort. This ties into our practical application slide that we'll go down to in a second. And the last one, this one I actually thought out of the 3 was the coolest, because with this presentation I've been talking a lot about factors that affect performance, and we usually see them as bad things. We usually see this H plus and this PI and all that stuff as bad, which in the context of performing your peak output, yes, in the moment is bad, but he used this study to find out if these things, when they're present, they're going to help you and your body to recover and perform better. And what did he find? Yes, you need these things present during your training, during your exercise, to help your body become more efficient and better, so when you do have those high performance opportunities, your body's ready and it is ahead. So this just plays into peripheral nervous system, aerobic, and anaerobic. Okay, so practical application. Who is this for? You probably could have guessed it. I had them on my first slide. It's your athletes. Football players, wrestlers, volleyball, swimmers. This is who this is for. These people that are performing. Max effort, competition, it's for these people. But who should be paying attention to this? Who should be utilizing this information? I put a coach and a trainer, but it's essentially anyone that works or oversees athletes. Anyone that's in charge of their performance, they should be the ones that should be utilizing all of this information. If we go back to that first slide that we had that went over all of the things that affect performance, this slide, coaches, anyone that's overseeing athletes, trainers, strength and conditioning coaches, they should understand this material. Obviously understand what they can do best to increase their performance, but for the specific athlete, they need to understand how all of this plays into optimal performance. So pretty cool. I don't think a lot of coaches understand how important it is, and it's their responsibility to know this stuff. So it's a pretty cool application. But click all the way back down. These are the key takeaways I kind of want you guys to have. So fatigue isn't just one thing, it's a lot of things. You can't just put it on the central nervous system, you can't just put it on the brain, but you also can't just put it on the peripheral nervous system. Fatiguing and failure and the factors that affect performance, it's going to be a mixture of everything. Who's to blame is a hard finger to point, but if you know all the things, you can help in a lot of different ways. You can attack it on a lot of different fronts. Failure equals protection. When your body fails, understand it's for a reason. You pushing through it or trying to push through it, there's a reason for that failure. Obviously, in these bouts of peak performance, you're going to have to push through failure. You're going to have to do as best you can. But understand that that's something you can work on, that you can increase your failure point, but failure is there for a reason. And there's many ways to improve. We've talked about all of these factors. There are ways to improve. It's 2025, there's a lot of things going on, there's a lot of research to be done, and there's ways that we can get better. There's ways that we can improve athletes' peak performance. So this is just a pop quiz. I don't know if we want to go through it or not. I don't know if that's important for this presentation, but I have 5 questions. I'm just going to run through them real quick. What percentage of total fatigue is typically attributed to the central nervous system? It is B, 10 to 15%. What is the primary energy system limiting an all-out effort under 10 seconds? C, ATP PC system. According to current research, improving lactate clearance most directly affects which aspect of performance? Recovering from high-intensity efforts. Number 4, what is one major protective reason CNS produces motor output during fatigue? C, to prevent physiological damage or overheating. Last one, free radicals contribute to fatigue by B, damaging contractile proteins like myosin and troponin. So that's my presentation. Hope you enjoy it. Hope you like it. Namaste.